Friday night we had looked at the fifth formal objection to swearing or to taking an oath. We've been majoring on the first half of Matthew 5 and verse 37. Jesus said, "Let your speech be yea, yea, nay, nay." And we saw what he meant by that. And then I said the next thing I wanted to do was, before we get into the sixth and the final, which would be Matthew 5:37b, formal prohibition to the oath, I wanted to expand a little bit upon Matthew 5:37a, practically as it applies to us. Now, he's talking about taking an oath, and so one thing that we know he means whenever he said, "Let your yes be yes and your no, no," according to what James wrote, one thing would mean that you can't take an oath, that whenever you say yes, that's all you can say, and your yes has to be true and faithful. Therefore, it has no need of anything added to it. You know, an affirmation, an oath, a promise, it has no need of anything added to it because your yes is true. So, one thing we would see is that just in that statement, he prohibits the use of an oath. But then there's something else that he says there that he's taking for granted, and it's a thing that he takes for granted that makes the disqualification of the oath so obvious, regardless of what all the other commentators are saying. And that concerns the use of simple, plain speech, that when you say yes and when you say no, then your yes indeed has to really mean and be, and you have to do yes. And if you say no, it has to mean and be, and you have to do no. Now, whenever we're talking about past and present situations, then I think we've got some type of control over them if we are in command of the facts. For instance, before I go any past that, if someone asks you, "Did you say such and such?" then you're supposed to give a truthful answer to the degree that you're in command of the facts. Or did this person really do that? You can say, "Now, I'm not for sure about all of the facts, but here is what I know," and you're supposed to tell the truth. And it's fairly easy to do. Just tell the truth about it. Concerning the present, will you go with me right now? You can either say yes or no. You're in command of yourself right now. What about when it comes to the future? What about when you tell someone, "I'll meet you somewhere at such and such a time," and you don't meet them there at that time? This is what we really want to start discussing here today, because Jesus is very plain, and it's very simple, and it's very serious what he has to say here. And I think that if we could get a hold of this more, it would transform our lives. Think of what a community of people, a home, a marriage, or a business, the world would be like if everyone's yes really meant yes and everyone's no really meant no. But how often when someone gives us a yes or a no, and now we're pretty much speaking of future things, do we really not know whether what they're giving us is truly yes or no? Now, if you'll go back 5 messages ago in your mind, we did a message entitled The Oath in Church History. We looked at some of the positions of various people down through the church's history. One of the positions that we covered was the position of the reformers, such as Martin Luther. And without muddying the water of them trying to divide between oaths and vows, they were opposed to taking oaths. They were opposed to that. Do you remember what their reason was for being opposed to oaths? The uncertainty of the future. They said the future, either the future or you, might change. But you have already bound yourself by an oath to an earlier declared path. And since you've bound yourself by an oath to that path, the future may change or you may change, and now your word can't change, though, because you have bound yourself to that with an oath. What Jesus has been showing us is that there's no such thing in the church as an oath, but that he counts just the simple spoken word that we speak to be solemnly binding. In other words, everything that you can think about and that you know about an oath, Jesus applies to your normal conversation. Now, we've been raised in a society where the taking of an oath, we think, or we have thought in the past, has a lot of power to it. I think that you would probably even think of a difference and note the difference if, for instance, someone swore to you, if they solemnly swore to you they would come and visit you next Thursday, even if a snowstorm hit, if they solemnly swore, you would almost expect that person to be there if they solemnly swore. If they just said, I'll be there, and a storm hits, you would almost expect that they wouldn't show up. It's funny how even we think, even though maybe not so much anymore now that you're getting more biblical light in your heart and mind now, but in earlier days you would think of an oath having almost more power somehow. At least the person who made the oath feels that it has more because he binds himself to it more. But what about the Christian, though? Since an oath is disallowed for him, then his very words that he speaks are just as solemn as that. But he is bound to that. The Reformers had a very interesting point here about oaths. Now, we're going to strike out oaths. We're talking about normal speech. How can you say something about the future when you don't know the future? They said the problem with taking an oath is the uncertainty of the future. Well, we don't believe in taking an oath. So the promise of speaking about anything concerning the future is the future's uncertainty. But then, here's what would come to our mind. Well, I remember earlier that was one of the boundaries of clarification in our study of the anatomy of a lie. That truthfulness, the fourth point said, truthfulness is compatible with change. In other words, the way we described it there is a person could make a statement, this is what they're going to do, and then if circumstances or events beyond their control somewhere in the future interrupted their plans, then they could go back on their word and not be guilty of telling a lie. You remember studying that earlier? Well, we're certainly not going to contradict that because I believe that's true. And we gave you several examples, the classic one being the one of Paul. He wrote the church at Corinth and told them how and when he was going to be there. And then events changed in their lives, not in his. And then for their good, for their benefit, not for his, he decided to change his mind and visit them at a different time in a different way. And of course they were accusing him of duplicity, of, if nothing more, of fickleness, but if more, of being a liar. You said one thing and you did another. And Paul said, I'm not guilty of telling a lie. Circumstances changed, and since we can only speak in accordance with known facts, and most of the time known facts are either past or present, they're certainly not future, then if what I thought about the future changes, then I have the right to change as well. Well, that is true in one regard, but I think that it's very easy to pick up a wrong impression from that. That we can just spout off at the mouth what we're going to do, what we're going to have, where we're going to go, when we're going to be there. We can just spout off at the mouth about the future, and since we have this fourth point as a boundary of clarification from our study of the anatomy of a lie, we know that truthfulness is compatible with change. Just because you change doesn't mean you're a liar, as long as things dictated it so that it was beyond your control, that you can just spout off at the mouth, and then you always have the safe haven, the safety of this fourth point as refuge to crawl back under and say, well, now wait a minute, I know that I changed. I know I didn't get there when I said that I was going to because such and such happened. Sometimes it's legitimate, and I would say more times than not, it's illegitimate. It's an illegitimate use of circumstances that are around us. Remember that the case with the Apostle Paul, he changed his mind because the other people changed. That's the first point. And he changed his mind, secondly, because it was for their good and their benefit. Now, Paul tells us that in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. He changed his mind, his itinerary. He changed the plans of his itinerary because of the response he received from Corinth. Not because Paul was fickle at all. It was because the Corinthian church was fickle that he changed his mind. And secondly, he didn't change it so that he could stay home and get some more things done or something. He didn't change it for his good or benefit. He changed his mind for their good and their benefit. That's something often overlooked. We just think, well, Paul changed his mind concerning future plans, and that means that I can at any time as well. Well, not necessarily. It's too easy to say it like that. If we don't have the intention nor the power to fulfill our word, then I think it's a great sin in the eyes of God to say that we're going to do something when we don't. Now I'm going to go beyond this, but I'm going to start with this because this is rather easy. If we don't have the intention nor the power to fulfill our word, then it's a great sin to God to say we're going to and then we don't. What did Jesus say? Let your yes be yes. We're going to teach you something this morning that I hope will change your life. It's very simple, but it is so needed in human relations, that people will be faithful to their word. That people will be faithful to their word. I think the tendency is to think of our words that we speak as somehow detached from us, that we can just make them and then they can be forgotten. We can just speak those words and then we can forget them. But your words, Jesus said, are an expression of you. You're going to be judged by your words. Death and life are in the power of your words. Words are an expression of you. You can speak those words. I mean, it's just a vocalization of certain consonants and vowels with the movement of your vocal cords and the vibration of air in the cavities of your mouth. And they go out and you said, I will be there tomorrow at 2:30. And it's funny how words are. Now they went out into the air, as invisible sound waves. And they went into someone's ear and they produced the actual sound and their brain interpreted that. And then somehow we think that now we're detached from our words, that I'm not bound by it. I mean, those were just sound waves it just vibrated air out there in the atmosphere. We think that we can make those and break those, that we can speak those and forget those, that we can say that and then live a life detached from that. And we don't realize that our words are just an outreach, an expression of us. You can go around thinking of yourself as, well, not an octopus with just 8 arms, but many arms. All the commitments and things you've said are just extensions of you, way out here. You said you'd be there at 2:30 tomorrow afternoon, so there's an arm of yours reaching way out 2:30 tomorrow afternoon, lodged right there. You said, I've committed myself, with my word, I've committed myself to be there tomorrow at 2:30. And you told your son, I'll do this for you next week. And so there's another arm that went out. One thing he's going to teach us through this is, well, two things, is that words are powerful, and he binds us to them, and secondly, be careful with what you say. And you're to be careful on the basis of the first thing that I just said. Words are powerful, and you're going to be held accountable for your words. Didn't Jesus say that by your words you'll be justified, and by your words you'll be condemned, right? That's Matthew 12. Same book here, Matthew 12, 34 to 37. By your words you'll be justified, by your words, hear it again, by your words you will be justified, by your words you will be condemned. By your words. He's teaching us in this much more than just what these radical reformers and these peace churches think, that we can't go to court and put our hand on the Bible. They reduce it to such an obvious thing and miss the depth of what he's saying too many times, I feel. I was telling my wife the other night, I said, isn't it just wonderful what God has shown us from this passage? Because when Dr. Freeman taught this, all you got out of it was you couldn't go to court and put your hand on the Bible and swear. That's all you got out of it, was what you couldn't do. So I never got the full depth out of this passage from anyone else's teaching out there. They just told me what I couldn't do. And then didn't go on to tell me what I must do, what I can and what I must do, but let your speech be yes, yes, no, no. And so we think that God somehow holds us guiltless. Whenever we say we're going to do something, we don't do it. Oh, I'm sure the message will be convicting, and you'll be thinking of things you've said recently that you haven't done. And it should be. We should base our lives on this and change our lives on the basis of a passage like this. That our words, when we speak them, are powerful. They're very powerful. When we speak those words, we're bound to those words. Our words are powerful on other people. They're powerful on us. They're as solemn as an oath in the eyes of God. He disqualifies an oath. Why? Because he said your words are supposed to be your oath. Your words are supposed to be so high and so truthful that you can't add anything else to it to make them more truthful. So he's saying your words are to be an oath. I mean, you should look at it like that. Don't think because we've taken away the oath from you that now your speech is not important. By taking away the oath, we elevate the importance of common speech. I'll say that again. By taking away the oath, Jesus elevated the importance of common speech, of everyday, of ordinary communication. We haven't lessened the power or the effect of your words, we've heightened them. By showing you not just when you're at court under oath, but at all times in your life, you must be speaking as though you're under oath. And your yes must be yes, and your no must be no. So if we think that we've got the freedom just to speak as we will, and then see what the future changes in our plans so that we don't have to do them, then I think we're sinning. Certainly our words, our yeses are not yes anymore, and our noes are not no. Now our yeses are no, and our noes are yes. We say yes to something, and we end up saying no to it because the future changes our plans. Or we say no, and we end up saying yes because the future changes our plans. So what is he saying? He's saying there's power in words, and therefore be careful with what you say. We're back to Ecclesiastes 5. Substitute in there ordinary speech every time you read oath, because he's talking about the same thing for us as a Christian. Solomon said it's better not to speak. It's just better not to say anything than to say something and break it. See, he said it under the connection of an oath. It's better not to vow than to make a vow to God and break it. Well, since we're not under an oath, we're under ordinary speech, and substitute that in there. It's better not even to speak than to say something and then break it. And I know what you're still thinking. Well, how does that square with what we've learned earlier, that truthfulness is compatible with change? Well, it is compatible, but we're gonna work our way toward that. It's not as compatible maybe as some people think, or it's not as easily compatible as some people think. I think oftentimes people don't even have the intention of fulfilling what they say. They just say it. Many times people are under pressure to come up with a decision, and so they make a decision. And we cannot make decisions because we're under pressure. Because oftentimes your yes is going to turn into a no then. How many times is that not true? That you make a decision, you're under pressure, and you make a decision, and then you have to go back on your word later, the next day, the next week, the next month. You go back on your word. That is wrong. You would have been better not to make the decision to begin with. Intention of fulfilling one's word is a very important ingredient here to common speech. You have to have the intention, the honest, full-fledged intention of fulfilling your word. And as far as you can tell, the power in addition. So many people don't even have the power to, they're just speaking at the mouth what I'm going to do or what this is going to do for me, and they don't know anything what they're talking about. And so Jesus would warn us to be more careful in what we say. How many times have we ourselves, made plans somewhat seriously, maybe not seriously at all, maybe seriously, only to cancel out later on? We have to call someone up, well, I'm sorry, but I'll have to cancel that. That's a favorite term in American life today. I'm going to have to cancel that. Or another one they'll put in there is, I'm going to have to take a rain check on that. I said that I would do it, but now I've decided not to. I wonder what the reason is. We're going to have to get pretty deep in this to come up with the right answer. I wonder what the reason is. Why did you decide not to? Now you see, truthfulness is compatible with change. If you're forced to change somewhere in the future, now, if just in your mind you decided, well, I don't want to do that, you can't go back on that. Nothing has forced you to change. You just got lazy all of a sudden. You see what I'm saying? We're making one little subtle distinction right away. I mean, if you say you're going to be there, and there's only one road there, and an earthquake hits and splits the earth wide open, and there aren't any helicopters to get you across, or no airplanes, or no balloons, or anything to get you over there, I think it'd be okay to stay home and you wouldn't be counted a liar in God's eye. But if you say you're going to be there and nothing prohibits you from going except you change your mind, you can't do that according to Scripture. What did we read back in Psalm 15? But a man sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. And what was that? A qualification for those that are going to dwell with God. A man that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. Now, of course, if you make an unscriptural statement that I'm going to come and kill you, well, then you can go back on that, because that's not a scriptural statement. But a man that sweareth to his own hurt, he's bound himself to something that's going to cost him later. And what did the Old Testament require of that man? Don't change your word. Don't change your word. If you change your word, you broke your vow, and you know what you had to do? You had to go to the tabernacle and offer a sin offering because you were a liar, because you lied. Then is it going to be any less in the New Testament? Hardly so. It's going to be more. It's going to be more. This may sound like kind of a doom, negative message. Think how glorious it would be if everyone around you knew they were so truthful that you could depend on their word. If you knew people were dependable. See, people are not dependable in this world around us. They're not dependable. Just go to any store and find out. And they say that they're out of this object, and they're too lazy to go check back there is the only reason they say that. Or it's going to be in on this day. How many times have you ordered something and they are liars? You say, but wait a minute, truthfulness is compatible with change, and some things interrupted them. I know, but they give you the closest, the earliest possible date just to, keep you on the line there, to keep you expectant. And they know it's going to be several months. They won't say, I'll guarantee it'll be here between now and next year sometime. That way at least you know they're not going to lie to you. It'll be here between now and next year. They'll say 3 days. They know it won't be here until 14. But if they tell you 14, then you'll say, I'll cancel that order then. I don't want that order. They tell you 3, they know they've got you then. They can lie to you with 3 because they know they'll keep you there, and you'll have to wait the 14. Who's going to go through the thing of canceling it all by the 8th day when you think, well, I waited over the 3, but I'm almost to the 14, so I might as well hang on a little longer. We live in a world that's not dependable, with people that are not dependable, whose word is not their bond, whose common speech is not like an oath. They just talk. They just talk. Particularly about what they will do for you in the future, what they will bring to you, or they will call you, or whatever. Future things. They just talk about the future. And they can always, with this little lame duck excuse, fall back on, well, no one knows what the future holds, so, that's why I had to change my mind later on. I would say only very rarely is that ever a genuine reason for changing one's mind, for having to go back on something. Oftentimes we go back because we said something rashly, hastily, and we want to take it back now. I decided I don't want to go there after all. But you said you were going to go, though. I hope you'll think along with me very well and closely this morning. What if you told someone you would go with them, and nothing comes up but you change your mind? I can't help but see that you broke in Matthew 5:37. What he's encouraging there is what? Truthfulness. Truthfulness. Let your yes really mean and really be yes. If nothing comes up, I don't see any scriptural way of getting out of it. Except if you said you're going to do it, you're going to have to do it. Or you've broken Matthew 5:37a. See, most people don't think like this. They think as long as it's a future event and the future changes, then I can change. And so often the future doesn't change. They change, so they change the future. The future didn't change. Everything is still set up. Nothing is interrupted. They can still get off work the same day. Plans are still made. They can still go to wherever they wanted to go with this other person. Nothing has changed except them. They have changed, and so then they decide to change the future. Now, I'm going to cancel out on this. I decided I would rather do something else instead. Now, I wouldn't be teaching this to you because it affects me just as much as it affects you, unless I thought it was scriptural. I've got to be held to it myself as well. And I wouldn't want to be held to this unless it's scriptural. But think of the implications. It means you're going to not make so many future plans. Whenever you make them, you're going to be as certain as you possibly can about your desires and what the future holds. I mean, you say, wow, that's going to take a lot of forethought, and that's the whole name of the game. Too many people don't think ahead. They just speak hastily and rashly. And Ecclesiastes 5 strictly prohibits that, speaking rashly with your mouth, whether an oath or not an oath, hastily with your mouth, that you will do or that you won't do such and such in the future. You see, if you say that you will or won't do it and you break it, you lose your dependability. You lose your credibility in the eyes of other people. And you know, one thing I put here, probably just as high as anything else, concerns appointments. Being somewhere on time. That's not just a little pet peeve or something with me. He said, let your yes be yes. And if you have an appointment to be somewhere at such and such time, that is when you're to be there, not 20 minutes late, or you would have made the appointment for 20 minutes later. Now, yes, this happens to, also be taught by maybe some decent people out there in the world. I was brought up with this. We were always to places on time. Some families are just notorious. Well, we had a family in this church not long ago. Husband and wife and couple, they were always either late or almost late to church. All the time. Well, they got better towards the end of their stay here, I believe. When we first met them, they were either always or almost always late to church. And, and I would think for a person like that, if nothing else, just try to psychologize yourself. Just pretend like we really meet at 8:30 in the morning. Just pretend like that. You'll probably get here about 8:45 or 8:50 then, right on time for the 9 o'clock service. If nothing else, pretend that it's at 8:30. It's best to know that it's at 9 and prepare to be here by 9 o'clock. They'd come straggling in at 8:58 and 8:59 and 9 and 9:01 and 9:02. And the rest of you would be getting here at, 8:45 or 8:40 or something like that. People out there in the world, bosses on jobs are good at this. You're not there on time, you're going to get fired. You can't just show up for an 8 o'clock job at 8:20 and 8:35. And if they're going to run their business on that basis, and they do and they should, how much more should the Christian church be run on that basis? That when we have an appointment, we are bound to that appointment. I want this to register on your mind and your heart. It's so important. You tell your children you're going to do something for them, you're bound to that. You're bound to that. From Jesus' own lips, let your yes be yes and your no, no. People just are notoriously late whenever they're supposed to be there on time. They have all of these fancy excuses of the car, this, that, or the other, and only rarely are those excuses legitimate, like they run out of gas or something. Only rarely is it legitimate. Generally, they try to squeeze in, for selfish reasons, a few more things they wanted to do before they rush to their appointment. And see, now you're not fitting in the case of Paul, who changed his mind because the other people changed, and for their benefit and their good. It's for your own selfishness that you've changed your plans. You wanted to squeeze in a few more things at the house before you left, and so it made you 10 minutes late for your appointment. Hey, we cannot do that as Christians. We lose our dependability. We lose our reliability in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of one another. I mean, there are some people here in the church that are more reliable than other people when they say they're going to do something. And you earn that as a reputation. Some of you are known. I think of you, when I think of you as far as being dependable, I think of some of you as being more dependable and some of you less. Why? Because of what you do. I don't just think up a thought, well, I think that person's dependable and that one's not. No, that's not arbitrary. You deserve it. You earn it by being dependable. And if you're dependable and you fulfill your word, you don't go back on it, all of a sudden you earn that reputation. People say that is a dependable woman or man. Whenever they say they're going to be here, they're going to be here. And if they're not, I know there's some very, very good reason for them not being here. It's probably beyond their control, and that's why they're not here now. They said they were going to do this, and now they're not. There's probably a very good, legitimate reason why they're not doing it. That is what Jesus wants us to be known for. People who are reliable, who are dependable, people who do not lose their credibility because we're always changing with the wind around us. Now, yes, I've taught before that truthfulness is compatible with change. But even if something does change in the future, that doesn't alter the fact that you previously uttered something. Even if something does change in the future, it doesn't alter the fact that you have previously stated your course. And it doesn't necessarily alter the fact that you should fulfill that course. In other words, some people look for the smallest change in the future so they can change their plans. That's not the emphasis of truthfulness being compatible with change. You've got to have some change in the future that's so significant that it prohibits you from fulfilling your word. That is the only thing that's legitimate. Let me break it down like this. A statement or a commitment should not be made unless there are two ingredients. A statement or a commitment should not be made unless there are two ingredients. Of course, one of those cannot be, you know what the future holds. None of us know what the future holds. So that's not an ingredient here. The future is unknown to us. We're unknown to it. We stand as aliens with regard to the future. But when you make a statement or a commitment, two ingredients should be in it. Number one, sincerity of intent. Sincerity of intent. You have a thought out, honest intention of doing it if you say that you're going to do it. It's not some haphazard, reckless, under pressure, at the last moment, before the bell rings, type of plan that's made. You have a thought out, honest intention of being there. Some people make the most ridiculous plans they could possibly perform because they don't even have the intent of performing it. You know, they'll say that I'll meet you somewhere, and they say it much too early. They have to drag themselves out of bed. You know, if you already know that ahead, that you're not going to be getting up at the crack of dawn that morning, then don't make a plan for the crack of dawn that morning. You're binding yourself to something that's not necessary. A well thought out, non-haphazard, reckless plan would say, I'll meet you at 10, not at 7. I'll meet you at 10. Then you can fulfill it. You have the intent of fulfilling it then. If you say 7 and you don't mean to get up until 8, you don't really even have the intent of fulfilling that then. And what can you say? Well, I had to get some extra sleep that morning. You already knew that in advance you were going to need sleep that morning. You should have made your plans later.
For the continuation.
Really even have the intent of fulfilling that then. And what can you say? Well, I had to get some extra sleep that morning. You already knew that in advance you were going to need sleep that morning. You should have made your plans later. If you made your plans for 8, you got to be there at 8. Even if you need, or 7, you need to be there at 7. Even if you think you need to sleep until 11. If you made your plans for 7, that's when you have to be there. No bridges were blown up on the way there, and your car didn't have 4 flat tires, 5 including the spares. There's no way you could get there. I think that biblical Christian scriptural honesty should be so great and important in our minds that we will keep our word even if the future changes, if it is at all possible for us to do. I mean, even if it's going to, well, he that sweareth to his own hurt and changes not. Even though it's going to do something negative for us, if we've said we're going to do it, and it's somehow feasible or possible, then I think biblical honesty will attempt to do it. Just to try to imagine what a family or a church or relationships and society in general would be like if people were people of their word. You just knew if that brother told you that he was going to do this for you, you just knew. You didn't even give it a second thought. You knew that he would do it. You knew he would do it. You knew if he said he would go, if this sister said she would go buy you this item, if she said she'd buy it, the store doesn't have them, she'll find that item for you if it's at all possible. Now, if she put stipulations to it, that's another matter. You see, you have to be very careful with what you say. If you say, I'll make an attempt to buy this for you, then make an attempt. If you say, I will buy this for you, then you will buy that for them. If you said, I will buy this as long as the store has it, then you're only bound to that one store. You didn't say, I'll go everywhere in Vermont looking for it. But if you leave it so open-ended, sister, I'll do this for you, then she's expecting you to do it for her. She's not sitting there thinking, well, I wonder if the store's going to have it or not. She's expecting that somehow you are going to do it for her anyway, whether the store has it or not. Before I move on past sincerity, I'm not talking just about plans for the future. I'm also talking about information. Information, well, that's past or that's present. I think so often people think that they're guiltless in saying something, in providing some measure of information, as long as they report the facts as they know them. But they haven't made any diligent search to really discern the matter. They could have put a little more time and effort into it. In other words, they feel safe in saying, I know I'm not lying to you because I'm just giving you the facts as I know them. Well, maybe you could be a little more honest. That's true in what you said. You're giving us the facts as you know them. But I think that you could really build even a little better of a relationship if you made a diligent search to find out a few more of those facts that you don't know, so that when you present some information to someone, you're giving them a pretty good idea of what that information is all about. In other words, what I'm saying here is don't be looking for lame duck excuses out of responsibility. Whether it's to provide information to someone or making plans for the future, and the future changes so you think you can change. Don't look for lame duck excuses to escape your responsibility. Now, we were brought up in a family that was on time. My father would be sitting in the car blowing the horn. We were on time. He could have probably been a little better by helping his wife get all the children ready. That's one thing. All he's got to do is get himself ready. And she's got, well, my mother had 3 children to get ready, and some mothers have a lot more than that. He's out there, he's shaved and dressed, and he thinks, well, what else am I supposed to do? I'm ready. Where's everyone else? But the mother has everyone else back there. But my point is, I'll say something else about that here in a moment. My point is, he was going to be there on time. And boy, did we ever get left? Oh, did we get threatened? Oh, I did get left one time. He said, we're leaving. He said, you'll either be here. It was to go to school that morning. Now, I remember it very vividly. I was just languishing there in bed, enjoying a few more minutes sleep. He said, we're going. And so they got in the car and left, and there I was at home. I couldn't drive. I was too young to drive then. So there I was. I just stuck there. Because we were going to be there on time. And we didn't miss very many appointments when we were being raised. My dad beat that into all of us, that you will be there on time. And his reasoning was good old carnal reasoning. If you don't, you lose your reliability in the eyes of other people. They won't trust you. They won't want to be your friends. They'll look down on you. You'll be a suspicious person in their eyes because you're a person who says and does not. You're a person who says and does not. And so many people are like that. For the life of them, it would take the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines to get them there on time. Someone has to, and this statement has even become famous now in American society, that they'll be late for their own what? Funeral. Why do people say that except a person is habitually late? They'll be late for their own funeral. Late for their own wedding ceremony. Some people have been for that. I think one of my parents was, as a matter of fact. Got caught speeding. The only time they got a speeding ticket was on the way to the wedding. They were trying to get there in a hurry. They were late. And so tried to break the law in doing it and got caught, and that really slowed them down then. They would have just gone along at a regular speed. They probably would have made it on time, but they got caught, and the policeman wrote them a ticket, and they were late to the wedding. Some people probably would be late to their own funeral if that were possible. If it were possible, they probably would be. So we were brought up like that. In our family today, we try to be reliable people. Whenever one of you people ask me a question, I try to come back with an answer. Whenever you give me something here in a service, pass a note, make a request, most of the time in the next service you'll find a note right back to you again. And that takes a lot of mental work to do that. I recognize it'd be a lot easier to be a lazy person and just think, well, the next time I see them and that thought pops in my mind again, then I'll get back with them again. I try not to operate that way. I try, if they have a question or they want to do something, I try to get back to them with a note the very next time. I put it along with the reel, and Dave sometimes has a pack of notes in there to pass out to people. Because here's the way I think. If I don't do it now, I won't get it done. Other people's philosophy is, why do today what you can do tomorrow? My philosophy is, why do tomorrow what you can do today? That's my philosophy. Why have that hanging over you for the next week when you can do it today? All it takes is pick up the telephone call, give them a call, tell them the information, boom, it's over with. We're a note writing family. We have notepads everywhere, around the house, around my study, in the car. I remember something I've got to do or say or tell someone, I write a note very quickly. If I don't, I'll forget it. And then I'll remember it 2 or 3 weeks or months later whenever I see you and that conversation gets brought up again. That's a terrible way to live. See, if we can all be, and I'm not a model example, but I do a pretty good job at it. So I would say follow my good example when it's good. You get back with people. Whenever you say you're going to get in touch with them, you get in touch with them. Whenever you say I'm going to get in touch with you, that doesn't mean I'm going to call you 8 months from now. That means you're going to get in touch with them. That means in a reasonable period of time. People are just not dependable. Be dependable. People respect that. They admire that. They appreciate that. When they know you're a person when you're a person of your word. When you say you're going to do something, then you're going to do it. And you've heard my little spill before on letter writing. Man, I've written so many letters to people, and I'm thinking of people outside the church who they don't even give you the courtesy of responding to it. Not even the courtesy. Now, there are exceptions here. Some letters are not meant to elicit a response. It's just, hello, how are you? Here's what I've got to say. It doesn't elicit a response. Sometimes I don't write back. There's no response to give. But if I'm going to write, if a letter needs to be written, I'm going to write it then. And you can check in my study. There's a notepad with notes on it, and I know what the notes are right on my desk right this moment. I come into my study in the morning, and I've got all these thoughts on my mind, and I've got my pocket stuffed with notes that I brought from home. We stopped the car. Literally, you can ask my wife. Well, the last couple of services on the way home, I said, get the pad out of the glove compartment. Get these notes down here. I stopped the car myself and write notes. I stopped. I did it just this week. I was down in Granville, headed home from work. I'd gone through Granville for some reason, and I remembered something. And I thought, if I try to remember this until I get home, listening to this tape and singing, I'll forget it. So I pull off the road, I get my notepad out and get my pen out and write myself a note. And you know what? I rarely ever fail to keep an appointment or to do something that someone has asked me to do. I rarely ever fail to do that. And it's not because I have some tremendously great memory. My memory's pretty good, but you can't always rely on your memory when you have so many things coming into you. Write yourself notes of it. My mother always had a chalkboard in her kitchen. Just notes, notes, notes on the chalkboard. Women are supposed to do this long before it's time to grocery shop. If you wait till you get there to pick up what you need, you're thinking all week long, I've got to get this, I've got to get this. And if you're a good housewife, what do? You start jotting notes here. Got to remember this, got to remember that. If you don't, you're going to forget a lot of things. And it's been the experience of many people, as you get older, you forget more often. My mother, who had an excellent memory, now just forgets many things. I kind of feel sorry for her. She's so disgusted with herself. She told me the other night on the phone, so disgusted, because I used to have the best memory, and I'm getting older, and I'm forgetting things now. So I keep telling her, remember, Mom, write them down, write them down. As soon as you think of them, write them down, you won't forget. You forget where you put the note. We have certain places by my valet at home, in the glove compartment, several places around the home and at my desk. Melanie has a desk at home and in that, and there's another desk in the other room, and there's pens in there. Just pens everywhere. It's too bad that we have to live a life like that. You have so much going on and so many commitments. In one sense, it's too bad. It's kind of like our house with clocks just in every room. You in one sense, hate to be that way, live so bound to time. But in another sense, our whole society is based on, fractions of moments that you've got to be there and do this. And we just have clocks everywhere, 2 in the same room. 2 in our bedroom, 2 in my study, 3 counting my watch. 3 clocks there to look at, to keep reminding me of what time it is. I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But so many times I've written letters to people, and I'm not thinking of anyone here in particular, but I don't get any response at all. And it's a letter that was meant to elicit a response. It was a letter that contained questions in it. I think you would call that one that was meant for a response. You get no answer at all. Just like they treat you as a slab of concrete or something. You're a human being. You ask them a question. You deserve an answer from them. I mean, that's just humanity. You deserve an answer if you ask a question. They think you're a piece of bark or a slab of concrete. They don't even give you the courtesy of responding. I'll tell you what my personal opinion of people like that is. I despise them. I despise people like that. That probably is an unchristian attitude. Maybe I'll have to change that. But I despise people like that, who tell me they're going to do something and they decide they don't want to. And you know, and so often these people then won't even give you the courtesy of getting in touch and telling you they changed their plans. They just let you find out whenever the plans fall through that they changed their mind about it. My word, I mean, it'd be one thing to change your mind and let someone know. Now, I'm going to break my word here. I'm going to cancel that plan. At least let us know. How many times have you been, as they say, stood up? They didn't even give you the courtesy of letting you know that they've changed their plans. And that doesn't just concern little girls going out on a sophomore date and they got stood up or whatever. We all get stood up by people out there telling us they're going to do something and never give us the time of day again after that. That is wrong. Jesus said, let your yes be yes and let your no be no. And yes, it will cost you. And I've really thought about this, meditated on this deeply recently because of us teaching this. And I've seen a few times the last few weeks and months now where it's hurt me, hurt in the sense of, I had to go out of my way or it cost me something. Simply because I was going to do what I said. I said I was going to do it, and if there's any way possible, I'm going to do it. If you tell someone that you're going to give them $10 and you don't get paid that week, maybe you can find 10 somewhere else though. Don't just use that as an excuse. Well, the future changed, so now I have the right to change. Where can you find $10 to give that person that you promised them, quote unquote, that you would give them? See, don't let a change in the future automatically release you from your declared path. If you've declared a path, you must follow that path, unless it is simply impossible to follow it. Is that clear enough for all of us to understand? That's exactly what Jesus teaches here. And I have found myself having to suffer because I made a plan, something changed in the future, but I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it anyway. I said that I'm going to do it. It's going to cost me something. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to lose sleep. I'm going to lose a meal. I'm going to lose some money, but I said I was going to do it. And just the loss of those things, in my mind, is not enough of an excuse to get me out of my responsibility. Something big's going to have to come up to change my mind about this that will make me change my plans. So, sincerity. Make sure that you have a sincere desire and intent to do what you say you're going to do. Don't just make a rash statement. Then a second ingredient, I said, is the ingredient of power. How many people have jumped up and said, I'll help you, I'll do it for you, and they don't ever show up? Oh, so often that happens in churches. You ask, who's going to help us clean the church? And all these hands go up, I'll help. It looks good to raise your hand and say, I'll help. They never show up. Who's going to help mow the lawn around the building? We'll do it over here. They don't even own a lawnmower. It just looks good to raise your hand. You don't even have the power to fulfill what you say you're going to do. So before you make a statement of something you're going to do in the future, here are two ingredients to have. Make sure you have sincerity of intent and the power to fulfill it. As far as you can tell, the power. There are just a whole lot of things you better not commit yourself to because you don't have the power. If you tell the sister, I'm going to bring this back to you no matter what, watch out. That may take $100 worth of gasoline driving around New England until you find it. You may not have the power to do that. So we need to measure our words and bridle our rashness. Measure our words and bridle our rashness. And so that would leave us with several options concerning what we say about the future. You may, and here's the first option that you may be coming up with, okay, that means now if I tell someone, all right, this afternoon at 2:30 I'll meet you somewhere. By George, I'm bound to that. That means even if my child's crying and my wife is begging me to stay home and something's malfunctioning somewhere, nothing really serious. None of those things were serious. I've got to be there at 2:30. then you think, by George, I just think I'll be a non-committal type person then. I'm just going to be this perpetual dodger. I won't ever say yes to anything. No, I don't think that's what he's talking about here. That's one option that you could have. All right, I won't ever commit myself. No, that's a pretty weak type of individual, not to commit yourself to anything. He didn't say don't say yes or don't say no, just say maybe all the time. He is understanding that people are going to say yes and no, not maybes. It'd be a terrible world to live in if every time I asked you something you said, well, we might. Well, we might. Then what we're back to is your lack of dependability. I can't depend on a might or a maybe. Now, sometimes you may have to say that. You don't know the future. You say, we will perhaps do this. That's fine. That's fine to say that. But I'm saying don't adopt that as your motto just because of what you learned this morning. I don't want to ever commit myself to anything. So I'll be this non-committal, perpetual dodger. I'll always dodge responsibility as far as the future is concerned. No, if you have thought about it and think you can do it, say that you'll do it. I mean, you become more dependable. Then we can have a relationship. If it's always a maybe, I trust you see what I'm saying, well, we can't even get along with each other. Because if you tell me maybe and then I ask someone else thinking that you might not be able to do it, well, if they don't, then do you want to do this? Well, we might. Well, then, how are we ever going to live with all these mights and maybes then? We just soon just shut up and stay home and live the life of a hermit. If we're going to have relationships, we're going to have yeses and nos between each other. So here's one option that people could go for. I don't recommend it as a proper option. The perpetual dodger who does not commit himself to anything. Now, occasionally, yes, that will be the case to take. But don't adopt that as your motto, just because of what you've learned this morning. Another option would be, well, I'll make plans for the future, and then since I know that truthfulness is compatible with change, then I can always break it in the future. No, I don't think that's a proper option to follow either. I'll make plans, and since I know that truthfulness is compatible with change, then if the future changes, I can always go back on my word. I don't think that's the motto either. I think there are occasions for option one and occasions for option two, but that should not be the rule of our life. There are occasions for both of those, where you just have to say, I can't commit myself to this. I may be there. There are occasions for the second option. The future changes so dramatically, or you change or they change so dramatically that you just can't possibly fulfill your word. The third option, which is the biblical option, is think and then plan and then perform. Think and then plan and then perform. Don't just plan, think before you plan. And once you've committed yourself through your thought to a plan, then perform it, if at all possible. That's the biblical option. Notice that neither of these three options here will be 100% of the time true. Neither one of them will be. Neither of these three will always be true. Sometimes you'll have to be non-committal. Sometimes you'll make a because you just have to. You just have to. And half is H-A-V-E, capital letters. You must break it. But most of the time, I think it should be our third option, that you think, that you plan, and that you perform. Of course, a person can always be the approximate type person. Well, we'll be there approximately at this time. Or we'll be there around. Well, that could be good on occasions, but that gets a little old after a while. What do you mean by approximately? I mean, why can't you say that you're going to be there at a certain time? What's to prohibit you? As long as you don't know anything that's coming up, why can't you say you're going to be there? See, I'm telling you, people are lazy. That's why they do this. It takes a lot more mental energy to remember to get in touch with everyone who's asked you something than just to be a lazy person. It takes more self-discipline to commit yourself to a certain time at an appointment and to be there. It takes more self-discipline. It's really easy to say we'll be there between 4 and 6. And it's not that you're going to be out somewhere else. You don't know what the traffic is going to be like. You see, if that were true, it'd be good to say between 4 and 6. Because depending on the traffic and all of these other circumstances, we'll probably fall in there somewhere in between these 2 hours of 4 and 6. But if there's nothing to prohibit you from getting there at 5, why can't you just say 5? Except the person is lazy, they don't want to commit themselves, they're not disciplined in their life, they want to go home, and we don't know what we want to do, and so we'll make up our mind later. Well, I hope that I'm not seeming too rigid one way or the other. You have the right to make up your mind later. You have the right not to commit yourself. But I'm saying don't use laziness and a lack of self-discipline to be your excuses for that then. Most of the time we can say we're going to do something and we can do it. Too many times we're using the changes in the future to change us and they're not legitimate. We could still do it. It would cost us a little more, be a little more out of our way. We could still do it though. You said you were going to pick up someone on the way somewhere and now you're going to another place. You can still go out of your way and go pick them up, can't you? Don't just use the future that's changed now to change you. Say, well, I couldn't pick you up because I had to. You could still backtrack and get them. What I'm trying to encourage here and instill in our hearts is what a blessing it would be if we were all reliable people. If we would give yeses and nos and be reliable. It would be such a blessing to know people like that. Such a blessing to know people like that. Who are yes and no people. When they say yes, it's yes. When they say no, it's no. Now, in conclusion this morning, do the Scriptures say anything about this besides what we just have here in Matthew chapter 5? Well, they certainly do in a very interesting passage, Leviticus chapter 27. Leviticus chapter 27 is a chapter on oaths. A little difficult to understand. I just want to point out one or two things just briefly in closing here. I don't even know that I want to read any of it. It's a long chapter. You could read it later. It speaks of making a vow, such as committing yourself to the Lord, for some service, like the first 8 verses, and if you can't do the service, literally bodily, then the worth of you can be translated into money. 50 shekels of silver, I think, for a male, and 30 shekels for a female, and then verse 9, beast, and so forth. Well, anyway, the chapter goes on about various offerings and tithes and so forth to God, of things that have been devoted, committed to God through a vow or through an oath. And what this chapter will set forth is that if a person has made a vow or an oath, and then something comes up and they have to or think they have to break it, then whenever it comes time, and here's what's interesting, God doesn't just let them off the hook. They've got to fulfill that. If they can't do it now, they'll have to do it later. And then whenever it comes time to fulfill that, they have to add the 5th part thereunto. In other words, God penalizes them for saying they're going to do something and then not doing it. He doesn't say, now I free you from the responsibility. You still have to do it in the future, and then you're penalized a 5th part of the worth of the object because you didn't do it when you said you were going to do it. You read just a few statements from one commentary on this chapter. These laws on the right of redemption of gifts dedicated to God highlighted the need for caution and seriousness in making vows and promises to God. Rash promises may afterwards be regretted, and Israel's law of Leviticus 27 did not permit the man who had made a hasty promise to forget it and do nothing about it. And then his comment is, we may well pause to consider how many promises we have made and have not fulfilled. Now, I like that. That was the Old Testament law. You break your promise, you still got to keep it in the future. And then you're going to be penalized by having to keep more than what you said. So I'm not saying we're bound to Old Testament law, but I'm saying maybe that's a good thing to think about in your own life. If you break your word to someone, then maybe you need to make it up later and make it up then some. That'd be a good practice to follow. You broke your word, then you make it up and you add something extra to it because of the mistake that you have made in your rashness earlier. That's Leviticus chapter 27.